All right, man, peace. For those of you brothers who've been on my channel long enough, you know that I've made quite a few videos on Mr. Steph Curry as a basketball player. I've stated that I believe that he's the best shooter ever in the history of the NBA, as well as being one of the most impactful players in the history of the NBA. There's no doubt about that. But in regards to a lot of the quote-unquote causes that he tries to get behind, or at least act as if he's getting behind, it's very clear to me that he's an MK asset. I have little doubt about that. I've done a few videos about it that I will probably be revisiting again in the near future. And it's just very clear to me that he's a corporate whore and a corporate asset, much like Mr. LeBron James. A lot of these guys make many of the statements that they make in regards to societal engineering based off of the building of their brand. Like LeBron James with the opening of his quote-unquote I Promise school, that's to assist him in brand building. The statements that he makes about Donald Trump are to assist him in brand building. And a lot of brothers don't catch on to this fact because they themselves are caught down the woke rabbit hole. The reason why I call it a rabbit hole is because a rabbit hole is basically a pathway to another dimension, often based in delusional rhetoric and Marxist ideologies. Marxism equals Luciferianism. Luciferians tell you things that are meant to allegedly free you, liberate you, but are really meant to enrapture you and bring you into the hold of their true God, that being the goat god Pan, aka the Baphomet. And you'll see that oftentimes they'll speak according to globalism, female empowerment, i.e. feminism, which actually is the female principle above the male principle. They like to glorify the child over the adult. Why is that? Because the child is venerated in the rituals of Pan and Bacchus. That is why they engage in pederasty or pedophilia. Of course, I'm not accusing Steph Curry of that. I'm just stating that a lot of what he states is based in brand building. It's very important for brothers to understand that most of the comments that many of these prominent athletes make is to build their name, build their brand, so that they can monetize themselves even more. LeBron James knows that it's very lucrative to be woke today. Steph Curry understands the same thing. Why am I saying all this? Because he recently crafted an article for the Players Tribune, or at least an article that's attributed to him, in which he decided that he was going to lavish his wife and his daughters with praise. And there's nothing wrong with that. But there's a difference between loving your wife and your daughters and venerating the feminine principle, especially for gain or an increase in profile. Now, we recently saw Damian Lillard also state in regards to the WNBA that they should be paid more, that they deserve equal pay. Well, Steph Curry now is reiterating that sentiment in this article, which makes me think, is there an agenda afoot in the NBA to have many of these prominent quote-unquote woke basketball players act as proxies and representing some of the ideologies of the corporate elite, telling them, go on TV and talk about equal pay for women. Go on TV and say this, go on TV and say that, and we'll assist you in amplifying your profile. I have little doubt that that is what is going on. So first we're going to go over this little short segment on this television show, and then after that we're going to delve into the article itself to see what we can glean from it. So of course they're going to talk about it and I'm going to chime in.
Steph Curry wrote in the Players Tribune about raising his daughters in today's times and the quest for equality between men and women. And in the article, Curry wrote, quote, I feel like I've been receiving this education on what it means to be a woman in America. And what...
Now, brothers, listen to what the female anchor just stated. She said that Steph Curry stated in the article that he feels like he's been getting a quote-unquote education on what it feels like to be a woman in America. Now, what the hell does that really mean? If you're a so-called black man here in America, and really nowadays a man of any race, you know that the female is getting advantages in the court system, she's getting advantages in the household, she's getting advantages in the workplace. So what is Steph Curry talking about? That he's getting an education on what it feels like to be a woman in America. What he means is that he's getting indoctrinated into venerating the feminine principle, and he's getting told by his corporate backers, his corporate sponsors, this is what you're going to say to make sure that we venerate the feminine principle. Because in return for you doing that, you're going to amplify your profile. You're going to make yourself and your family more monetizable, because at this point his family is a brand. Not only is Steph Curry a brand, but his entire family is a brand. And these are things that I like to touch on intermittently with you brothers and incessantly with you brothers, because a lot of you guys get caught up in a lot of the nonsense of TV, a lot of the jargon of these athletes. And you believe a lot of their nonsense. You believe when they say that they're fighting for this or they're fighting for that. And do I believe that they're insincere about everything that they say? No, I don't. I do believe that there is a part of LeBron James, there's a part of Steph Curry that convinced themselves that when Under Armour or Nike tell them to say certain things, in their heart, they believe that what they're being told to say is correct. But at the end of the day, they're being told to say certain things. There's no doubt about that. And then on top of that, as I've stated in previous videos, I have little doubt that Steph Curry's wife is one of his handlers. And she's the real boss behind their whole situation. But that's another video for another day. I've already touched on that in previous videos. But once again, brothers, when these guys make these statements, this is for corporate brand building. It's not because they're trying to make a serious change from the bottom of their heart. They get told by their corporations what to say, and they act as proxies.
One lesson from that education that's really stood out to me is to always stay listening to women, to always stay believing in women, and when it comes to anyone's expectation for women, to always stay challenging the idea of what's right.
Now listen to that. The anchor stated that Steph Curry said in the article to always stay listening to women and always stay believing in women. No, brothers, you're always supposed to stay believing in the Most High. But the reason why he framed his wording like that is because the woman is his true God, starting with his wife and going upward. A very sad situation. But when I catch a lot of these stories on television, I like to make these videos for you brothers so that you have an understanding of what many of these athletes are actually about. Steph Curry's job, he just goes out and practices basketball for 6 hours a day, 7 hours a day. He comes home. He makes a bunch of silly videos with his wife so that they can put them on YouTube or on the internet so that they can build up their family brand. And if he messes up in any way, she goes and grabs her teacup and clinks her spoon a couple of times, and then he sits down on the couch and starts to cry. This shit is so ridiculous. Players Tribune, Steph on gender pay equality. That's what it says on the bottom of the screen. So the article is not really about his family. The article is once again meant to perpetuate and propagate the agenda of so-called gender pay equality and the alleged gender pay gap, which is fallacious. It is not real. Especially if you're a so-called black man. Brothers, the so-called black woman and all women get paid more than you do to do the same job that you do. When they talk about the gender wage gap, they're talking about the various races of women not getting paid equal to what the Caucasian man allegedly is getting paid. And I don't even think that's true. But they definitely get paid more than the so-called black man does. So Steph Curry is talking about he gets an education on what it means to be a woman in America. I think that he needs to be educated on what it means to be an actual so-called black man in America, because he has no idea what he's talking about. And I don't think that he needs to have an idea what he's talking about, because he's just a shill for his corporation.
It is an incredible read. And
yeah, I bet it is an incredible read for a liberal female like yourself.
And one I'm thankful for. Thanks, Steph Curry.
Well, if you're really thankful for Steph Curry, if you're not married, go become the man's concubine. Make yourself useful. All right, man, peace. So, brothers, this is going to be a pretty brief epilogue in reference to the video that I did pertaining to Mr. Steph Curry and the very obvious simping that he's been prompted to do by the NBA, which pretty much seems to have initiated a concerted attempt to push the WNBA through many of the Luciferian players in the NBA, acting as the vanguard, acting as the mouthpiece for NBA's interests, and of course Luciferian interests of trying to equate the female basketball player with the men's basketball player. What's so interesting now is that you have many of these men's basketball players claiming that the women need to be paid more, but they themselves will not donate parts of their salary to the women's league. If you did that, problem solved. Steph Curry, LeBron James, Damian Lillard, Kobe Bryant, Isaiah Thomas, all the big advocates for the WNBA, all they would have to do to nullify the so-called disparity in the wage scale between the male basketball players and the female basketball players is to donate their entire salary. Steph Curry will still be making more than enough money through Under Armour to continue to feed his family. LeBron James would still be making more than enough money through Hollyweird and Nike to continue to live the same lifestyle. So on and so forth, but these guys won't do it. Why is that? Because they're being told, make sure that you tweet about the WNBA. Make sure that you tweet about how great that league is. And they're being asked to do that by many of the NBA executives like Adam Silver, Michelle Roberts, who's the head of the NBA Players Association, etc. Do I know that for a fact? No. But I'm just going by what my brain tells me. And it's not that difficult to figure out. Adam Silver has such a good rapport with many of these modern day woke NBA players that he pretty much could ask them to do anything and they'll do it. Because they know that whatever they want him to do, he'll do. That's their relationship right now. Because the NBA, they represent the quintessence of a woke sports league. That's what they're trying to turn the NFL into. But point is this. I spoke on what Steph Curry was attempting to do. He was attempting to act as a simp and to utilize his daughters and his wife as a mechanism to provoke pity from the male viewers of basketball, to try to make them feel some type of sympathy for the WNBA players. And now we're just going to look over the article real quick to see some of the tactics that he tries to use. And it's highly possible that he himself did not even write this essay. But let's see what it says here. It says here, but at the same time, Riley arriving at that age where she's really starting to come into her own as a person, it's also been a learning experience for me. What does that mean? I'm a grown man, but the magnificence of the female principle is so astounding that even my 6-7-year-old daughter is a vessel of wisdom for me to drink from. Once again, this is all about venerating the feminine principle, but we're going to see more of it as we read on. Growing up, I was lucky to be raised by my mom, Sonia, an incredible and fiercely principled woman who had the courage and vision to open her own school, the Christian Montessori School of Lake Norman. In other words, Steph Curry's mother acts as the head of the family. And she also has the Deborah demon on her. She has the Deborah demon / Jezebel spirit on her, in which she most likely believes that she could teach the Bible. It is what it is. That spirit runs rampant amongst many of these liberal females today that engraft themselves into the church system, particularly the so-called black Christian women. They almost all uniformly believe that they could teach the Bible for whatever reason. And for the last 7 years, I've been lucky to be married to another incredible and fiercely principled woman in Aisha. That's absolutely right, Steph Curry. You've been with that woman for however many years. You're making hundreds of millions of dollars, but you're the one who's lucky to be with her. I got you. Who is both a successful business owner and the most amazing mother to our 3 kids. Well, let me say this. I'm not going to judge or evaluate her as a wife or mother. Only Steph Curry can do that. But in regards to her being a successful business owner, we all know who put up the seed money for her businesses. We know who that is, but he can't say that. And one lesson from that education that's really stood out to me is to always stay listening to women, to always stay believing in women. And when it comes to anyone's expectations for women, to always stay challenging the idea of what's right. In other words, what is Steph Curry telling you in this little blurb right here? That he is a liberal black male, i.e. a simp, with a capital S-I-M-P. I don't know what you heard about me, but he's a mother effing S-I-M-P. That's what we know about Steph Curry. That's what he's telling us with this little blurb right here. I'm going to read it again. And one lesson from that education that's really stood out to me is to always stay listening to women. That's the first thing he got wrong. Now, isn't he supposed to be a Christian man, brothers? Isn't he supposed to be a so-called Christian man? He obviously has never read the Bible. You're supposed to love and protect the women in your family. But you listen to them to make sure that you can separate the bullshit from what's relevant. Because when the woman is talking to you about 85% of his bullshit, the other 15% is something that you can actually use or utilize to understand what she's really getting at. So it's very obvious to me, to be quite frank with you. It wouldn't shock me if Ayesha Curry popped that man's cherry, to keep it 100 with you. To always stay believing in women, and when it comes to anyone's expectations for women, to always stay challenging the idea of what's right. Well, if you're going to stay challenging something, challenge some of that bullshit that they're going to tell you. That's what you really should be doing, Mr. Stephen Wardell Curry, or Wardell Stephen Curry, whatever the hell the man's name is. And I'm already on record as telling you, brothers, I have little doubt that Steph Curry is a monarch athlete himself. I've done a few videos about it. I also believe that Ayesha Curry is one of his handlers, which means that his parents were formerly his handlers and they raised him up in the programming. Please understand that many of these monarch athletes, they have quote-unquote religious altars. I stated already that when I saw Steph Curry and his family all get the same tattoos, I knew that something was rotten in Denmark. Because anybody who seriously reads the scriptures understands that you're not supposed to get a tattoo. And I'm sure that I'll get some new wave Christian that will try to go back and forth in the comments. Don't waste your time. Don't waste your time. But let's read on a little bit. In other words, I like to think that these ideas have been on my mind for a while. Well, I think that those ideas have been on your mind since you've decided, and since your people have decided, that you're going to build your corporate brand around being the quote-unquote nice guy, the cherubic, harmless guy, with the quote-unquote beautiful, i.e. light-skinned family that will be easy to accept by people of every race here in America, because their race is not too much in your face. That's what it's really about with this essay, with this article, and Steph Curry. This is all more corporate brand building. And Steph Curry, like most of these high-level modern Masonic athletes, they have no problem pushing many of these Luciferian agendas pertaining to quote-unquote gender equality, things that they truly don't even believe in themselves in their heart of hearts, but they know that it's best for their brand. And that's all they're concerned about. So let's read down a little bit. Let me skip down. Oh, here we go. This is what I wanted to get to. I want our girls to grow up knowing that there are no boundaries that can be placed on their futures, period. Well, that is what you should teach your children. That is what you should teach them, both your boys and your girls. Remember, we're in Babylon. So you don't want to put any hindrances on your children, but at the same time, and I'll probably be starting a series on this, many brothers in this Babylonian society have acquiesced to raising their daughters to fit a certain prototype, to fit a certain archetype of an entity that basically is genderless, is sexless, and therefore does not make an adequate wife or mother to a young man. See, when you raise your daughter to disavow herself of gender roles, all you're doing is adding to the problem. You're not helping the problem. To raise your daughter to be one of these authoritative feminazis, these overly authoritative feminazis. But we'll see what comes of Mr. Steph Curry's daughters. We'll find out, and his son as well. We'll find out, assuming that this society stays around that long to see them grow up. He says, I want them to grow up in a world where their gender does not feel like a rule book for what they should think or be or do. Well, that does not sound very Christian, Mr. Steph Curry. So you must be one of these pop culture Christians, which I already know is what you are, because the so-called Christian altar It's just a part of your programming. And I want them to grow up believing that they can dream big and strive for careers where they'll be treated fairly. Well, I say this all the time. Brothers, the main thing that if you have children or family members or what have you, that you should be trying to imbue within them is to start their own business or initiate their own career where they can work for themselves, make their own money, be their own boss to the best of their ability. That's what you should be teaching your children. You should not be teaching them to have the job mentality and to hope that they get treated fairly. The only person that you can count on to treat you fairly is you. That's it. I'm going to say it again. The only person that you can count on to treat you fairly is you. Always remember that. And here's the kicker here. He says, and of course, paid equally. Well, Steph Curry, I have news for you, bro. You're only going to get paid equal based on the level of work that you do. And that's the bottom line of it. And you, being a so-called black man, it's amazing to me that so many of these so-called black men have jumped on the gender wage gap bullshit storyline, when in reality it's actually the so-called black man who gets paid less for doing the same work than every other demographic. That's why when these women present this falsified data about the gender wage gap, it's always comparing themselves to the Caucasian man. It's not the black woman comparing herself to black men who work the same job. Because they already know not only are they getting paid more to do the same job, they're getting more job opportunities than so-called black men get in every field. Bottom line. But we already know who people like Steph Curry and LeBron James are. They're these pampered, entitled athletes who have really never lived in the real world, but want to act as if they're so simpatico with the quote-unquote regular guy. And they have no understanding of what that means. Steph Curry has been a celebrity since high school. He was a top player on his high school team. He went to college, became the top player on his college team, was drafted in the first round of the NBA draft, and has basically been a star player in the NBA since the 2012-2013 season. And even before that, his name was widely known because of his college exploits. So he's never been a regular person. He's never lived a regular life for him to speak about what society should be doing. He's reaping the benefits of celebrity worship. And I think it's important that we all come together to figure out how we can make that possible as soon as possible. Not just as fathers of daughters or for those sorts of reasons, and not just on Women's Equality Day, every day. That's when we need to be working to close the pay gap in this country. Brothers, this is what happens when you have athletes acting as leaders. When you guys rant and rave about this athlete, quote unquote, giving back and that athlete, quote unquote, giving back, all they are corporate whores. That's all they are. I don't care who they are. That's why I say you appreciate an athlete for what they can do on the field or on the court, and you leave it at that. Stop trying to make them Messiah figures. They're just not that. Just because they can dribble in between their legs does not mean that they can lead you to freedom. And I have no idea why brothers continue to push and promote that nonsense. But then again, I do know why. It's because in this society, athletes are treated as gods. And the so-called black man wants to be loved in Babylon. And it's never going to happen. But anyway, let's continue on. Because every day is when the pay gap is affecting women. Well, Steph Curry, how many days is the pay gap affecting so-called black men? Because that's what you should be speaking on. I'm going to ask you again, how many days is the pay gap affecting so-called black men? Break that down for me, Steph Curry. And every day is when the pay gap is sending the wrong message to women about who they are and how they're valued and what they can or cannot become. Well, you know, the greatest value of the woman, the beauty of the woman, is as wife and mother. Not as some angry, bitter, tired chick sitting next to you in a cubicle, mad at the world because she has to send out an email before 1 p.m. and her lunch is at 12 p.m. So she's mad that she had to miss lunch typing up an email. It's a lot less stressful at home. Why don't you take your ass home and make sure your husband and your kids are happy? Much less stress. No muss, no fuss. But you know why you have to flood the workplace? Because you don't want to have to perform your role for your man. That's what it all boils down to. And Steph Curry, Mr. Christian man, he should know that already. But the reason why he doesn't know that is because his mother was the dominant figure in the household, so that's all he knows. All he knows is female dominance. And wherever you have female dominance, you're going to have confusion. Notice the man said he was raised by his mother. He did not mention his father. Now, I know that his father was a professional athlete, so he probably was not home that much. But Steph Curry is on record as stating that it is his father who taught him how to play basketball, who remade his shot all the way from the ground up. But he does not mention him here, unfortunately. So he's another so-called black male who has drank the Kool-Aid of Mother Goddess worship. Steph Curry says, last week I did something I'll never forget. I hosted a basketball camp for girls. That's very, very unfortunate. Once again, he's assisting in the masculinization of these little girls. I don't know if he thinks that that's going to help the situation, but many of these athletes, once again, they worship Baal, they worship Pan. And in public, they act as these magnanimous figures, but behind the scenes, they know the impact of what they're doing. But they're assisting in the great work, bringing together the opposing forces of the masculine principle and the feminine principle. One has to ask themselves, why are they so worried about the so-called pay gap between men and women basketball players when nobody's watching their sport? Why are they investing so much money in teaching little girls how to play basketball when nobody cares? The only answer is that it is to promote a certain ideology that the average person is woefully unaware of. That's the only answer. Because a lot of people scoff and they snicker when I state, or even when others are now stating, that the WNBA is basically solely to promote lesbianism. But what else could it be for? To watch women play basketball? Nobody cares. Nobody cares. The vast majority of female basketball players either are or become lesbian for whatever reason. Now, Steph Curry states that the reason why he started the basketball camp, he says, is something more than that. I think it was also the sort of thing that can help to shift people's perspectives, so that when someone sees an NBA player hosting a camp, now you know maybe they won't automatically assume it's for boys. And so eventually we can get to a place where the women's game, it isn't women's basketball. It's just basketball, played by women and celebrated by everyone. You know what's funny, Steph Curry? I can't remember if I've ever seen you at a WNBA game. I've even seen Kobe at WNBA games because his daughters are being raised as men. That's what he's doing. Once again, so-called black man, you have to stop raising your daughter as a boy. You're not helping the situation. I know a lot of cats are going to get upset. But a lot of you dudes have drank the Kool-Aid, and I know why that is. Because a lot of you were raised by two entities, your mother and the streets. In the streets, you learn a certain code. In the streets, you learn how to play basketball. From your mother, you learn how to worship the feminine principle. Now you're trying to bring the two together. And it's not going to work. It's not going to work. Unfortunately, basketball is a major component of the modern Negro so-called quote-unquote culture. That's all it is. It's not a component of people who have a real culture. And what many of the males of our quote-unquote race are doing is trying to push basketball on their daughters because they couldn't have a son. And that's not what you do. But so many so-called black men today, they worship the feminine principle so much, they would not even know where to start in raising a daughter. because they're so shook and so scared of the feminine principle because there was no man in the house. Once again, we cannot raise our daughters to be men. That's an abomination. One thing we've always maintained about our camp is that we want it to be world class. And in 2018, here's the truth. You're not world class if you're not actively about inclusion. So once again, Steph Curry is a globalist. I tell you brothers this all the time. All these woke athletes, they're not nationalists. They talk the pro-blackity black bullshit as a cover. They're globalists, i.e. Luciferian. That's what they are. All right? Hopefully many of you brothers are starting to see this and starting to grasp what I've been telling you for a very long time now. Let's scroll down because this shit is silly. Here's full gold all these little girls who should be somewhere learning how to bake. And the girls didn't just bring it on the court, they also brought it off the court. We had a Q&A session with several successful women in sports and business, which historically have been fields dominated by men. When he says men, he's talking about so-called white men. He's not talking about the so-called black man. But Steph Curry understands that it's easier for him to cater to women than it is to try to assist so-called black men. That's why I state over and over again on this channel, this channel is a pro-truth channel for the so-called black man. That's all it is. Okay? That's all it is. Because the so-called black man gets nothing in this society. Nothing. And the little bit that he does get, he don't even know what to do with it. Because he's never been shown. And it's a damn shame, man. But it is what it is. It's all right. That's part of being in Babylon. Let's scroll down because, like I said, this is tedious. Let's work to close the opportunity gap. Let's work to close the pay gap. Does Steph Curry have any real stats stating that women are getting less opportunities than men to do the same job? When we all know for a fact that many of these women are given opportunities to do jobs that they cannot even do just because they're women. He says, and let's work together on this. Now, this is how you know, once again, that this is driven by the NBA and these corporations. Because for those of you brothers who watch NBA TV, they have a campaign called Lean In. And they've had this campaign for the last 3 or 4 years or so, where NBA players get on TV and speak about what men are supposed to be doing for women. Which is amazing to me because we're constantly told that women are the stronger sex. They're the smarter sex. Especially the so-called black woman. We're constantly told that she's a strong black woman. So I have no idea why they need men to lean in for them for. Let's see here. Earlier this summer, a few weeks after the season ended, Aisha and I were blessed with the birth of our third child, Cannon, our first son. And one of the things that has been most on my mind since then is the idea of what it means now to raise a boy in this world. I already know, just based on his gender alone, that Cannon will probably have advantages in life that his sisters can only dream of. Now look at this. Steph Curry is already demonizing his baby son. He's already stating that his son is going to have opportunities that his girls won't have. So he's already trying to promote and propagate the victimization mentality in his daughters and the perpetrator mentality in his son. And I'll be touching on this in other videos. People oftentimes speak about the quote-unquote white guilt paradigm, where the Caucasian liberals try to promote this white guilt mentality on the average Caucasian in America. Well, the black man, the so-called black man, is constantly being inundated with this gender guilt mentality, where supposedly he's the one who has done the so-called black woman so wrong or has done women so wrong. And brothers have to be very, very aware of that. Because no one has held the so-called black woman back. As a matter of fact, She's been welcomed with open arms into many components of this society. Has she faced resistance in her goals, in her ideas in regards to wanting to graft herself into mainstream America? Of course. Because the so-called Caucasian is always going to get preferential treatment over the so-called black woman. But they're far more welcomed than the so-called black man will ever be. So it's very unfortunate that Steph Curry is already willing to, at least on paper, appear to be willing to demonize his son for the sake of glorifying his daughters. But it's not a surprise. Because as I've told you brothers already, Steph Curry is a servant to his wife and his mother. He's a simp. Okay? He venerates the feminine principle. How do you make honest sense of that as a parent? What are the values in this moment to instill in a son? It's a lot to think about. No, it's really not a lot to think about, Steph Curry. It's just very obvious that you have nothing to teach your son outside of basketball. So, unfortunately for your son, he's going to be raised to be a simp and someone who's scared of women. Pretty much like how you were until Ayesha Curry popped your cherry. I'm just playing. I'm just joking. I don't know if she's the one who took his virginity or not, but he certainly seemed like it. He certainly seemed like Ayesha Curry had to give him a drink and calm him down before she took his virginity, allegedly. He says, but in the end, I think the answer is pretty simple. I think you saw him the same thing that we told those girls last week at our camp. Be yourself, be good, and try to be great, and always be yourself. I think you teach him to always stay listening to women, to always stay believing in women, and when it comes to anyone's expectations for women, to always stay challenging the idea of what's right. Cannon Curry, I feel sorry for you, bruh. I feel sorry for you, man. Because most likely he's going to end up another one of these dudes that doesn't understand life until he's about 37, 38 years old. A couple of baby mamas deep. A couple of chicks that just wanted to act nice to get to that Curry money. But we'll see. Brothers, it's very, very important to teach your sons, man. Tells you that in Ecclesiasticus, the 30th chapter. That when you teach your son, you grieve with the enemy. You have to teach your sons, bro. You can't just teach your sons to be in fear of women. Because that's really what Steph Curry means when he says, stay listening to women. What he really means is just do what they say. That's how you keep the peace. And that's not how you keep the peace at all. That's how you maintain the facade that the woman is above you. That's how you know, once again, that Steph Curry is a simp. There's no doubt in my mind that he's intimidated by the feminine principle. He's intimidated by his wife. And I think you let him know that for his generation to be a true supporter of women's equality, it's not enough anymore to be learning about it. You have to be doing it. It's 2018, school's out, it's time to go to work. And when he talks about work, he's talking about, once again, the great work of putting the capstone on the pyramid. This shit was pure Luciferianism. That's all it was. That's all it was. I guarantee you that Steph Curry is a venerator of the mother goddess, if not outright, certainly subconsciously. No mention of his dad in this entire article. That's a damn shame. But anyway, peace.